Hello, Emily. How are you doing today?
I'm okay, Franca. How are you?
I'm doing fine. As we just chatted about, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm on my 30, I think, 2 hour travel towards Sydney, which is making me both excited and anxious at the same time. So I'm managing.
I understand that.
um, to start off, why won't you please introduce yourself for us so that our audience knows who you are?
Of course, I'm Emily Hodge and I'm a psychologist and mindset coach, primarily helping female founders and coaches who run service based businesses to help them serve their clients better and run their business with more profit and ease.
I feel like I needed to know you in my life like this time 2 years ago.
Someone
I
once said they wanted me an Emily in their pocket. I'll take that.
yes, yeah, I would back that campaign 100%. Yeah, because I was, as I said, so the kind of, yeah, this time 2 years ago, I was on that kind of transition of figuring out what I want to do with my life. And I was coming from a place of like personal dissatisfaction, work dissatisfaction. I um, I had a lot of things to work out on my own, like a lot of beliefs and trauma and just like events from my childhood to go through,
Yeah,
which all of them kind of like all of them impacted how I showed up in my day to day business,
yeah, yeah.
uh, and they still do. So kind of that dance of trying to figure out how do I show up first for myself, then for my clients in a way that serves me. I think is like that was one of my biggest challenges because before my way of showing up meant I show up on weekends, I show up on 2 a.m., I show up by working 14 hours, I show up by like just this like deleting every boundary I have
Right.
or any major or minor level of confidence that I have gone.
Actually, well, and you say deleting every boundary without wishing to make a presumption. It sounds like maybe you didn't have boundaries rather than
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah. That's
pushing them away.
yeah, that's true. That's true. That's yeah. It's not an assumption. It's a fact
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was. I don't think I don't. I didn't have boundaries for a lot of reasons. I think the first one was I didn't have like anyone role modeling them.
Mm.
And when I did, like when I met people who have boundaries, I thought, oh my god, what a rude person.
Yes.
Because no one like in my like with my family, like um my the relationship between my parents or even their parents was really like dysfunctional for a child to look at and to go through. So I didn't have anyone kind of role modeling that it's okay to stand up for yourself, that it's okay to say no to things, that it's okay to like not raise your voice but speak your truth, and kind of get like being in that environment and but also kind of getting raised by a family that acts a certain way.
Yeah.
I just thought I should just be quiet all the time and let people use me however they want because those are the behaviors that I saw for such a long time. And then when I went to Zagreb, so I was born in a town on the coast of Croatia. And when
Mm.
I moved here for university and figured out, oh, people are acting differently here, and I quite like it, but it was just like it was weird, like transition period of me realizing, like, wait a second, that's not rude at all. That's what should be the bare minimum of common courtesy to yourself.
Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah, and
especially
especially
where
with
it's not even taught sometimes. It's just that we're expected to have this element of permissiveness in some
Yeah,
ways, in
yeah,
so many ways, obviously. Speaking on
yeah,
International Women's Day, this is,
yeah.
a big thing for us to be raising, but there's a really fine balance between having a boundary that goes so far and it is actually rude in the
Hmm.
sense that it doesn't really benefit both parties versus a
Yeah,
boundary that is kind and compassionate,
yeah.
hopefully with the person who's setting the boundary, but also the person who's receiving it. And that's where you get a more gentle side of a boundary.
Hmm.
Everyone understands why it's there. Everyone understands it. You may not like it all the time, but it's present and it's
Yeah,
held.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that word, gentle, I think it grew under my skin for the past year or so, because
Mm.
I just figured out how opposite of gentle I was towards myself. And yeah, kind of holding myself to unrealistic standards.
Yeah.
Even now, like I say this every couple of conversations, how it's really difficult or almost impossible for me to relate with the achievements I had younger,
Mm.
because I just feel like someone has, like, written my name and put my signature on them.
Yeah.
How dissociated I feel from them, because I was always thinking about the next thing. I never stopped there, appreciated the moment, have been gentle with myself and recognize, oh, look at what you've done. Like,
Yeah.
I was just running towards the whatever was next, whatever I was creating next, without even thinking about so many kind of different things that I've done. And now, like, when I look at my CV, or like the awards in my drawer, which I should put on the wall just as to have them as a visual reminder or something, it feels like someone else just printed those out and gave them to me and
Yeah.
said, "You've done these." It's like, no, I don't remember I did them.
It's, but I actually love that you're using that word dissociated, and you mentioned trauma earlier, and we don't really need to go psychological about it, but actually you're bringing up really important things that a lot of people won't identify or know in themselves, and wouldn't necessarily go and investigate. But it's important, I think, in general, we do understand that those are elements of our personality that can be really unself-serving
Yeah.
and can lead to trauma. I'm not saying you caused your trauma, but it is traumatic when we understand, you know what, I couldn't accept that I had all that, whatever we call it, success or accolades. And
Hmm.
by the way, I am that too. I would say I'm recovering because I feel energy wise very different now.
Hmm.
But I'm absolutely the same as you. I have things that I did even 4 or 5 years ago, which is relatively still in the guise of my work that I am now. So it's not even, oh, that was at university or that was 3 jobs ago. That I'll look
Hmm.
at, my God, I did that. And did I sit down and love it or hold on to it and fully celebrate it? Possibly not. And so when I talk about the work that I do and how I try to help people be more compassionate in their success, it's always coming from a place of, I'm doing this too with you, and I'm failing also all the time in the best way possible.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Um, I think it it I think even like it is. I'm just intrigued by how you phrase how I didn't traumatize myself, right, with kind of figuring all of this out, but for to a certain element, it still feels like, it feels like trauma, and it feels like grieving,
Mm,
because I'm like, now I'm grieving the person, the Franca then, who didn't
mm,
have enough compassion to just congratulate herself on
mm,
whatever it was, and be like, I like to say, I'm worth it, or I deserve this, because I said all of the opposite things
Yeah.
It's not enough. I need to do more. Like, I was always striving for more without like just being really gentle and compassionate towards myself. So now, kind of unraveling all of this, even though like, I question all the time whether I'm doing myself kind of more harm in untangling all of these things from before, right? Because some may not be, uh, I don't know, needed or functional,
Mhm.
or some may even bring, like some days I just wake up depressed feeling about it. But I think that Franca now deserves the compassion and the time to kind of grieve and heal from whatever was
Yeah.
then, so that I can move on.
Yeah.
I don't know how I could move on otherwise, because this feels like, like a heavy weight on my shoulders, which
Yeah.
if I don't put aside, I can't go, I can't go forward.
Yeah. I totally understand that. And you almost talk about yourself in two different types, don't you? It's like the Franca then and the Franca now. And that's really and are we doing ourselves a favor by investigating this stuff? You're right. Sometimes not in the moment, but
Yeah.
actually the third Franca up there,
Yeah.
if it's in the
The future,
future,
yeah.
will absolutely benefit. And thank you, because you'll be able to reflect on all of this time as well. If you're a reflective person, which you are, it's the sort of thing you won't stop doing. And actually, there you go. That's another thing. Like sometimes we can berate ourselves for being so reflective, can't we? But
Hmm.
and that's a really interesting, it's an amazing skill, and yet we can think it's not doing me any good, but
Yeah.
it will have done you so much good, and it will continue to do that.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
I hope so, because I did sometimes, like, some people would say I'm too reflective, or I'm too like always thinking and analyzing things. But I was just speaking with my friend yesterday. I said to him, but all of that is data, and
Good
all of,
point.
like, with all of these things, like, if I do analyze, like, you can't necessarily over analyze data. There is a finite, almost like, number of analyses that you can have over a certain data point. And then once I go through them all and I connect them into a big picture, now I know for the future. I like it feels better for me. Kind of, I said how for me anxiety is kind of triggered, or it overwhelms me because of the act of not knowing things.
Mm.
But then when do this kind of data analysis of my past, then I know things and I can understand why they happened, or at least to some level. I don't like I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trained anything, but just me knowing how some things that have happened, whether that I did them or they happened to
Mm.
me, manifested in my life, or how they manifest now, it helps me manage myself today and be like, okay, but like this is actually toxic and I need to work on changing that. Without the analysis, it's like going through a life blind.
Well, you may, excuse me, you may not be a doctor or a psychologist, but you're an expert in you. And, anyone I ever see coaching or otherwise, that's exactly the point. We can't be, with or without qualifications, we know ourselves the best. And so you know that gathering data for yourself works because it
Mm,
helps you to understand yourself. And that's what makes you better if you don't feel great. So it's all logical, really. And yeah, I think it's wonderful. We are such wonderfully complex,
we,
crazy, in the
yeah,
best way beings.
yeah, yeah, we are, and that's something um I now kind of rejoice in. Before I was really I felt really bad about myself, because I'm multi-passionate. I can speak very fondly of a number of different topics. As I said, like, I love analyzing and going, just like being really reflective. And I thought, oh, I'm not good at any single thing. Like, I'm not very good at any single thing, and I didn't embrace my way of thinking, and my creativity, or just like my the breadth of my curiosity for like 26.5 years of my life. And I'm just coming to terms with it and thinking, but like those things are what make me. And when I embrace all of them, when I accept all of them,
Mhm.
I feel my best self because I'm not
Yeah.
muting, I'm not tuning down or downsizing any particular part. I'm being my full self all the time. And then that's how I function the best.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of that is around the idea of not comparing ourselves, not placing ourselves on a, the false structure of where we think we should be, at whatever that is in time, age, gender, situation. It's a vital skill for us to take forward, which is, can I be what I need to be for what my goals and my vision is, as opposed to what I think my goals and my vision and my purpose should be
Yeah,
based on my age, gender, blah blah blah. So yeah,
yeah,
I think veering away from whether we've got a defined goal, aim, and purpose for our life, but veering away from the thing that we feel most rooted to is one of the reasons why we're not gentle and we're not kind and we're not compassionate, because we're often battling ourselves internally to say, I should want these things and I should be going for them, but finding we're not very good at them, or we don't actually like them, or they were never meant for us.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, tough one.
It is a tough, and I know that every time when I kind of try to do the shoulds, I was just kind of brewing resentment inside of myself because I couldn't make myself to do those things, and then I would procrastinate. Then I would
Yeah.
judge myself because I procrastinated, and then this kind of vicious cycle of negativity and almost like mental self harm and self sabotage in a way begins because with the every action doesn't feel quite right, but then you still kind of judge yourself and guilt trip yourself into not doing the actions, even though you can't bring yourself to do them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that's really kind of that's something that's really hard to snap out of because at least I feel like so many people are trapped in that treadmill. It
Yeah.
feels like it's default. It feels like it's normal. It's the way that it should be.
Yeah.
That when people go off it, they manage that just because they got lucky,
Yeah.
and not because it's like not because it takes like really heavy amounts of mental energy to be like I like this is not how it should be, and then you just jump off and basically like you spin a couple of times and you bang your head on the counter or something like that phase of jumping off the treadmill until you can walk on your feet without kind of going back and like left and right, back and forth. It takes time, but then it's it's a whole nother world out there where you're not just in one running in one place basically all the time without stopping ever.
Absolutely. And you're talking about like a track almost that you get on, and sometimes you get off it and then you get back on and you find your direction again. It's,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it is, and like I think it feels like um I think for so many people the track like if we imagine the like the one in the gyms, right, where you just like the where you just run, and nowadays like they all of them kind of have most of them have the little TVs on,
Mm,
and what it feels like instead of you choosing what you're going to watch, someone else does it for you.
yeah. Yeah. And then you're trying to run to that speed, that direction, yeah. Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
was yeah, that was already set up, or even worse, because the machines log how the people before you
Yeah.
ran and the settings they had, you try, oh, let me try theirs. And then it's like, okay, but that's not necessarily meant for you because they might be like a pro athlete and you're just a beginner. And then like that comparison kicks in where it's like, I'm comparing like my chapter 2 to someone's chapter 20. And that's where even more resentment and judgment, and basically everything opposite of compassion and gentleness, being gentle to yourself, comes in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm really pleased you said compassion, because that's one of the ways that I started to get back from being pretty awful and negative to myself, was finding the concept of compassion. And obviously, it's a word, so we can understand the definition of the word, but it was more like the practice of compassion, and how that was beginning to build up a lot of evidence around the world on how that's a more strong predictor of resilience than things like self-esteem was. And so getting to that place and understanding it from a theory point of view and then truly living it was really transformational for me. It really made me drop a lot of the things that I thought I was running towards. It certainly made me drop a lot of self-doubt and the feeling that I should be doing more or better than I already was. And the ability to be present, because as a practice, it manifests itself in a number of ways, but it can be mindfulness. And that's the route that I took with it. But I guess what's interesting is it's not a story of, hey, practice mindfulness and you become more gentle. That can be part of a story, but it's so much more than that. It's the idea of living compassionately for yourself and for others. And then in my kind of work, how that impacts our business, because how that then goes to a hustle-based, often masculine environment with masculine practices from the patriarchy, not because we're all working around either loads of men or loads of testosterone all the time. And so bringing the gentleness into business has been even more fascinating, because inherently, quite a lot of us want it without admitting that we want to be kinder. I spoke to someone last week and they said, oh, you're a very soft character, aren't you? And they didn't mean it as a judgment or as a positive or a negative. It was just a comment. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because yes, but I also can be such a bitch and I can be really, really hard and harsh, and the other side of soft, which isn't very nice, but also the other side of soft, which is really good and positive and very boundaried and very clear. And so knowing all of that makes you really understand, and having conversations with people about it raises the idea that gentleness and hustle and busy, they're all phrases that get thrown around, but what do we really do with them when we run a business and when we are the founder? That's like my absolute passion, because we're all humans starting running these businesses, and then how do we do them successfully without burning out, whilst we're making money, whilst we're often serving people in a very passionate way, within the structures of how we are now, the online world, social political issues going on right now around us. As often as women, I don't just work with women, but it's predominantly women and people who identify as women, how we feel about the world around us within our business too. So,
I love what you're doing. As I said, especially because it's something that started as a process for me really recently. So I know how important it is, and all of us having conversations now is kind of one of the results of my process of going through this, because I wanted to bring this to light to as much people as I can.
Thank you.
Because I was I was and I am sick and tired of living in a world who's who has only one default. And it was decades ago, basically, and it doesn't fit our system today. It doesn't fit all of the unique differences of us, everyone living on the planet, and it doesn't it doesn't suit us, and it makes us feel like we are inadequate, where in reality the system we're living in is inadequate.
Yeah.
And Mika, yeah, kind of now talking to you or doing all of the other interviews or writing the articles, it's kind of my my small way, my small chip in trying to steer the world into something that kind of celebrates and glorifies everyone's uniqueness. And
Lovely.
so that we don't have to compare ourselves to anyone,
Mm.
people, systems, whatever it is. And as you said, like be truly compassionate with ourselves, being present in the moment and knowing that whatever you're doing now is enough and good enough as it is, because there is this I always I don't like saying it's good enough, because like
Yeah.
even enough indicates you're comparing something to, like
Yeah.
you're comparing that to something else.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because a long time ago, I mean, I'm no longer on Instagram at the moment, but I mean, I was probably on it very, very early
Mhm.
without having a business and then switched it to a business account. But I remember in the early days of either using it or in the business, it was like seeing a lot of, I suppose you still get it now, but it was more common 7, 8 years ago or so with like little quotes and
Quotes,
stuff.
inspirational quotes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I've always hated them, and been quite rude about them actually, but just they don't resonate at all. And so it's a personal thing, but they don't resonate with me. And having admitted that, lots of other people have then since told me, but it's that sense of like, how can a phrase that isn't right for you on that day work for you at all? That's what bothers me, is that surely we should and could create our own. But one of the biggest ones is always, you're enough. And I found it, I don't know how I feel about it now, but I found it frustrating because it was always enough compared to what? Enough. And of course, that's the worst thing to do. Compared to what is not the right thing to be doing with it. But it
Yeah,
was still, yeah, but I need more context. Enough for myself, enough for the world, enough for my pets. Yeah. So I totally resonate with you on that. It's a sort of give or take. Doesn't work
yeah,
for me today type quote, isn't
yeah.
it?
I think
But you were
like that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead. You go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that kind of that quote should stop at you are. That's it. That's the whole
Thank
story. You are.
That works for me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But you're saying about how things, were set up. And it's true. You've got to go back quite a way in history to think about how the Industrial Revolution has then probably impacted so much about how we work now online, which is completely different back then.
Yeah.
But it was still set up. So it was patriarchal, and it was still set up so that women and the feminine energy and otherwise had a different space. And
Mhm.
I think we are now, yes, of course, we're seeing so many strides and moves forward, but it's still very, very different for women. And I had a baby nearly 2 years ago now, and I still find myself. The interesting thing is the narrative, I think, when you go off to have a baby, if you go off to have a baby at all, because that's not always a given, right? If you go off and however you come back, it's the way we communicate it that matters. I've
Mhm.
really been careful not to apologize for only working 3 days a week, to not blur the boundaries of when I'm on and offline. And running your own business, that can be hard because obviously if you're a giver, then you like to be able to help people and be there immediately. So I think learning those boundaries early on have been really beneficial to me in my own life and my business, but also to then pass that on how you use boundaries, how you use compassion,
Yeah.
how you set yourself up for the best, most confident, like sales process, even. So you don't feel bad about asking for a good and healthy amount of money from people. And not just people, these aren't just any people, they're your ideal clients, and they're the people that you love working with, and they're the people who will benefit the most from working with you. So that's the minutiae of how this stuff works. Like it gets you more money because you end up being so kind with yourself when you say this is X thousand pounds, thank you very much. Or, I only work, or I'm only available 2 hours a week because I only have this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when when I was setting up my auto responder, which like it says,
I
um,
like it. I've seen it. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, like basically for context, it's like I don't reply like on Mondays or evenings or national holidays. Those were all of the things and weekends. Those were all of the times and days where before I did reply. Like if someone like
Yeah.
from the US sent me an email, it was 3 a.m. my time. My reply would come in at 3:01. I
Oh,
was there all the time, and the first thing when I would wake up in the morning, I didn't even have like a routine or something set in the day other than as soon as I open my eyes, I check my work messages and I open my laptop before even brushing my teeth or doing anything for myself.
yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, now kind of when I remember the cramps in my stomach that I had when I was setting up that autoresponder because I was jumping ahead of myself almost to kind of force myself to be like
Yeah.
it was almost fake it and you make it kind of
Yeah.
situation then because I couldn't for the world of me do it myself like on my own. I really struggle with not checking email and not replying to people as often as I can, even though I know how much of energy it drains me. It's
Yes.
something that I truly don't enjoy. Like I can't.
Yeah.
Even with what like WhatsApp messages, sometimes it takes me 3 days to have enough in me to sit for a minute, quiet down my mind, and be like, okay, now I can commit to replying to this person because I also want to show up
Yeah.
as a friend or partner or family member, whatever, with enough time and space to be offered to those people who need me or
Yeah.
who want to come
Mm.
back to me. And then it kind of dawned on me that if I don't prioritize my own time and my own space, no one will do that for me, right? Like I will just, I all of my life by that point I was giving like more than almost like 100% of myself to the world. I was stretched too thin on in many different directions
Yeah.
because I wanted to, I don't know, be always available. I didn't want to be rude. I was brought in like, oh, as I said, like a lot of the things that I kind of um, viewed from other relationships in my immediate surroundings. I thought that's the way you live your life,
Yes.
and that kind of then again like reflecting and analyzing on all of that. I was like, oh, but like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this is not sustainable. This doesn't work, and that's why I burned out not once, not twice, but like 4 times
Yeah.
throughout my life before even I knew probably for those 2 times that that's burnout. Like when didn't kind of exist as a phrase in my surroundings that I actually knew, oh, this is what's happening to me and this
Yeah.
is why. I just thought that's what everyone goes through.
I know. And also, I think we think that if we're heading towards it and we do notice it, it's almost like, well, everyone's like doing the same around me. Everyone's
Yeah.
frantic. Everyone's trying to answer at 3 a.m. So why should I be the one saying I can't? Whereas
Mhm.
actually, if you dig deeper, not everyone is, firstly. And it really shouldn't matter what other people are doing anyway. If they can't have boundaries for themselves, we shouldn't learn from them. We should be
Yeah.
the ones making the boundary and the example. But of course, it doesn't always work like that. But if we get aware of it, we can then take notice and change it.
Yeah.
And we're talking in early-ish 22. We've all had 2 years of craziness.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and in a way, we've all been, I would say, majority of people have been online more. And being online more has some advantages in the sense that we can feel connected, but many disadvantages around overuse, overtiredness, overstimulation, over comparison, lack of other social events or situations to make us kind of normalize what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things about burnout, if one of those burnout situations in the last 2 years, I wouldn't be surprised. But if you think about how many other people are likely in this situation right now, I mean, in terms of, we're all talking about, everyone's talking about the great resignation and the great, what is it referred to as? I think it's that, but it's no wonder. However, I would say starting your own business isn't the answer and panacea to everything, because no one tells you that you should only work 3 days a week, or you have to close your laptop at 9 p.m. because otherwise you're going to burn out and answer emails at 3 a.m. And so it's almost harder in some senses.
It kind of, it is, because I feel like I did an honest mistake, and now I laugh about myself of being naive, because I thought that because now I'm self-employed, there's no way that I will burn out, because I'm designing my own days. But then I just surprised myself with ways how I can overwhelm myself in my work and then burn out. It was like all of the other, like, it was like just untraditional ways of basically arriving to the same thing.
Yes.
But yeah, I know how a lot of people who become self-employed, the big difference is, especially if you're as I, like a recovering perfectionist and overachiever, it takes a lot to say it in brand style, unset your own expectations and be like, I need to be more realistic with what I can achieve in a certain time period, because I can't, like I'm watching on the side because I have my kind of yearly year laid out by months. Nice. And I remember when I was kind of setting this up, I had I had a big vision that's probably someone's like 3 or 5 year vision, and it was my 1 year. It was like we are not doing, like, I was like, no. no. And then I switched the table in a way that I decided, you know what? The first thing I'll do is I will block off my time off for the entire year.
Nice.
And then I'll see what fits. Because, like, in these kind of last year and a half or 2 years, I know how much energy I have. Like, it's still not at 100% as I had. Yeah. And also now, oops, I almost fell from my chair. And also now, I realize and recognize and appreciate that it's okay if I don't show up, that I won't show up every day with 100% energy.
Yeah.
And that's a big one for me.
Yeah. Well, also, probably, if you are on the perfectionism and a sort of high performance scale, where you can perform well until you can't, and then you have to stop and rest. It's almost like, all or nothing.
Yeah.
You probably feel like if you're showing up, then it has to be absolutely brilliant, and it has to be full, and all those things that you would naturally do. Whereas your version, your 75%, your 50%, that's enough. That's where we can go. That's enough. That's what's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might just need to share, one piece of information, and that's vital. Sometimes you might just need to hold a space for someone, and that's vital. But you were talking earlier about, recovering from those things and unsetting your expectations. I think where we struggle the most is the idea that we have been used to performing high. Mm-hmm. And even then, you probably doubt that you are a high performer, because you go, yeah, well, I could have done better. But anyway, that's one earlier.
That's dangerous.
When you start thinking about how to recover from it, or you have to because you've burnt out and you can't do anything anymore, we're in such danger of not allowing ourselves to move away from that's lazy, that's whatever those other connotations are of that word, that's rude because I've told that person I can't do that thing. That's lazy because I need to sleep or have a nap. that's not appropriate, because, you know, whatever it is that happens when we start putting boundaries in place, we can't do certain things. So it's always learning about, I need that rest. I need to even admit that it might feel lazy, but it's going to feel right eventually.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and again,
Uh,
that's really complex.
it is, and it's taken me a better part of these kind of 2 years to come to not feel guilty about resting and relaxing. Like now, I protect it with all my heart and soul. That's my time. It's my non-negotiable, because I was kind of really strict with myself with giving myself time to rest and relax, even though I didn't feel like it at the time. I understand how valuable it is to me, and
Yeah.
how like I even almost like I would accomplish less without it,
Yes.
because it feels like a formatting every single time, where like, or I say like sometimes it's like disc defragmentation,
Yes.
where you're kind of relaxing and your thoughts just kind of sort themselves out, and then when you come back, like, it feels like a clean slate,
Yes.
and you have more brain space and head space to
Yeah.
do whatever you need to do, which wouldn't be the case if you didn't rest and relax.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Oh, it's yeah, so much, isn't it? Talking of time, I do have to go in 10 minutes. I'll just let you know that.
Oh yeah, no worries. Thank you for voicing that. Because I feel like we can speak for hours.
Yes, I mean, this stuff is so, it just feels really natural to be able to talk about it. I sometimes can't believe people wouldn't talk about this stuff, but it's, you know, it's quite
Yeah.
emerging in the sense of trying to bring balance to your hectic day, if that's how it's watered down, and to then your hectic business.
Mhm.
Yeah, and a lot of the time we'll think
Mhm.
about business as being hard and harsh, and you have to push and you have to hustle. And I don't disagree with those things. We do need to, but we can also push and hustle, if we really have to call it that, with a kindness and an empathy about it.
Yeah.
And still having boundaries. We can still say, I'm going to work really well and
Yep.
hard for a period of time, but taking
Yep.
care of myself at the same time, or acknowledging that that will be it. I won't overpile myself, or
Yeah.
acknowledging I'll work hard for that goal relatively short term, like not working hard for 2 years flat down, and then, you know, that's when the stress shows itself.
Mm.
It's hard, and it's hard to get ourselves to acknowledge that we can still get success when we pull back a bit on being, you know, very, very driven, because you can still be driven and be gentle and succeed.
Yeah, that's like, I will put it on a post-it and stick it on my PC just as a visual reminder, because I always say it's hard sometimes you can remind yourself of it. Sometimes it's hard to believe, because there are not so many kind of role models or people talking about it as much as they are about the hustle culture, right? So
Yeah,
you have like a very high disbalance between the news and information that get to you and that you read,
yeah,
and then when the hustle part is overpowering, you
yeah,
start questioning yourself, am I doing this right?
yes.
Is everyone else going to succeed before me?
Yeah, and I get that, and it's really tough. I think one of it's a sort of obvious role model, and it feels like an obvious person, but it is a good example. Ariana Huffington, who used to say, get up at 5 a.m. and sometimes earlier if you want to like make your day successful. You have to do these certain things. You know, she kind of early days was, this is how you have to run your business. And then she
Mm-hmm.
fully admits she became insomniac. She couldn't sleep. She had loads of health issues. She burnt out. And then that's when she started to develop the Thrive brand and moved away from Huffington Post, and has now completely reframed not only how she talks on the outside, you know, teaching and sharing stuff with other people, but how she lives her life.
Mhm.
And so that's an example of, this is how I thought I would get to success. And of course, to some extent, she did. Of course, not just to some extent, she got successful with
Yeah,
Huffington Post, but
yeah,
she knows and acknowledges that that was to her detriment. And now she teaches and lives in a way that is much more in balance. She's quite a high profile example, but it's a useful one of saying, I used to believe in that, and here's what it did to me.
mm,
Um, and has since built a thriving brand on top of it. Now, fine, she came from millions and billions to build that thriving brand, but it's a useful way of thinking about how we build balance. But
yeah,
you're right. I don't think there are many role models or people, and the idea of being authentic with it too. So now it's very fashionable to say, I'm balancing, and my well-being is priority. It's not just fashionable, it's important, but it's a thing that we all strive for. And so the companies, or do founders just say it because it's a useful thing to say, or are they actually doing it behind the scenes? And that's where I go wrong sometimes as well. I try to live it as much as possible, but I also get knackered, and I sometimes have insomniacs nights, and I'm terrible, and I shout and I swear at my daughter. No, I didn't do that yet, everyone. I swear at myself. That's the issue. So there's a real balance between what you say you do and what you are doing behind the scenes, I think.
yeah. Definitely. And as you said, it's a practice, and we're all
Mm.
humans at the end of the day. So uh, we can't expect like it's. I know one of my challenges, and it's really funny. Like through recovering as a perfectionist, and you kind of setting up your routine and practices, you can still be perfectionistic about those.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's where I think the self compassion especially comes in, because you need to remind yourself what I'm like that for, in my case, like, so for 26 and a half years, this was my default. So
Yeah.
I won't get it right the first time, I won't get it right the 10th time, but I
Yeah.
need to keep practicing and making these small steps.
Yeah.
And one day I'll get it right. And one day it'll feel okay.
Yeah.
But I just like, so I like, as much as I needed, like, as much as my perfectionistic tendencies were showing up, and then the judgment and the guilt and the shame that come with it, like
Yeah.
I needed to be self-compassionate 3 times that amount in order
Yeah.
to balance things out.
Yes. And you were saying earlier, and it might be for a different reason, but you said you take 3 days to reply maybe to a WhatsApp, because you need to build up the energy to do it right. I agree with that. And I'll also say, I think in the olden days, I would have been on it and replied because whatever, anxiety, or I would have thought I'd have missed it. I have to say now, I'm WhatsApps particularly, because it's not business, mostly not business. I'm terrible. I really am not good on replying to messages. And I feel like it's very frustrating for other people. But in all honesty, it's a success for me, because for me, I'm prioritizing not being on my phone, or it's not even actively prioritizing myself over the person who sent me the message. It's just, I'm not anxious enough to reply to
Yeah,
this straight away.
yeah, definitely.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's like that's when the boundaries can be blurred, because it looks really rude, and it is actually annoying sometimes because I miss stuff, or I haven't told someone something. But to my mind, in the back of my mind, it's like, this is good because I am not worried about it. So
yeah. Well done.
yeah, exactly.
um, Thank you so much for everything you share with us today. Yeah, as I said, like I'm appreciative of your time. Thank you for making the ever and happy International Women's Day.
Yeah, thank you. Really nice day to be talking about this. And I'm going to reflect on our chat as well. And thank you for sharing your stuff with me so
You're
freely.
welcome. You're welcome. And
Franca.
yeah, I hope you have a lovely rest of the day, lovely rest of the week, and I hope to catch you somewhere soon.
You too, and have a beautiful flight.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Emily.